Hello, everyone. Welcome. Good to be here with you all. So we are here together for another webinar. We seem to have done quite a few lately, but I've just been looking and actually we haven't. So we're looking today at the importance of workbooks. I will be using some pages as examples, but they are just examples. It's the idea of using a workbook that's of the most importance and not what kind of workbook you're using, because that's really up to you. That's quite irrelevant, but we're looking at how to use them and how to incorporate them. So hello to people that I've put in the chat box. Good day to you all, and thank you for joining us. And please, if you've got any comments, questions, anything like that, please type them into the chat box. It's nice to have a little bit of interaction. We can't be together at the moment, but we kind of are. We're virtually together. So if you have got any comments or any questions or anything you want to add, please type away and I will answer everything that I possibly can. Or you might want to store some questions up and I'll make sure we've got some time at the end to have a chat about anything that's on your mind, or any queries or anything that's raised through looking at this session today. So hello to everyone and welcome and good afternoon. It's evening here, nice and cold and rainy and dark, but there you go. So for this session then, what I'd really like to do is to be able to have a really good understanding of the principles of using a workbook, any workbook, to use workbooks as an effective resource to actually plan confidently, to actually plan into your lessons how you will use the workbooks that you've got to hand. What, 30 degrees in Jamaica? Thank you so much for that, Frederick. That's really kind of you to tell me that. I think it's about 2 here at the moment. It was quite hot earlier on, 4 degrees, almost as hot as it's there in Jamaica. Oh, Turks and Caicos, yeah, I love it there too. I remember being in Jamaica very, very well. I was talking about it the other day. So thanks for reminding me. So we'll be looking at workbooks and how to plan to use them. Okay, so any questions at all, please just type away and I will make sure I get an answer for you. So, nearly clicked off there. So here we are. This is an example of a workbook that's from the Mission Science. There's a statement from the Mission Science workbooks, what the intention is, because they're strongly linked to national standards, the national standards curriculum. People have asked me in the past, so can we use these workbooks if we're working to other curriculum, or if we're not working to that, can we use the workbooks? Yes, you can. The workbooks, you'll see as we work through this session, are designed to be used as a in conjunction with other resources, but actually they're almost an extension and an additional resource that's designed to be used uniquely in its own way. So yes, they can be used, and we'll see that. We'll explore that as we go along. As you can see, I'm using Mission Science resources because I'm the author, one of the authors of Mission Science. I was involved in the first edition, I've been involved in the second edition, and do you know what? I can safely say I'm just authoring some secondary science resources as well, but don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but I just did, so hey ho. So yeah, so I'm using these resources because I can, because I authored them, so therefore I can use them quite safely and not upset anyone. So don't worry if you're not using Mission Science. Don't worry, because you'll see as we work through that I'm talking about how to use a workbook, not how to use Mission Science. Okay, so the NSC identifies the importance of science in primary schools. I recently, well, it's quite a few years ago actually, maybe 6 years ago, I did some work for an initiative in the UK, and we looked at primary science in everyday primary science schools, primary schools, and I was really alarmed to find that it wasn't always taught. It wasn't always taught well, and it was often not taught at all in primary schools. And I was told that it's too difficult. it will become increasingly difficult if we don't start earlier on. So the NSC identifies the importance of introducing science in primary schools. It develops and satisfies children's natural curiosity of the world. They begin to make sense of the world around us. They start to question the world around us. I was asked just this afternoon by a student, what is air? What is air? What a fantastic question. What is air? Well, you could go forever on that one, but we talked about the different gases and what a gas is. And I thought that was really like intriguing that they looked up in the sky and just went, what is air? Yeah, good question. It develops critical thinking or 21st century skills. It helps children to adapt to an increasingly scientific world, the world they will move out into when they are our age. Wow, what a different world that will be. As I said earlier on today, I remember being at an exhibition in America not that long ago, maybe 4 years ago, and I saw a table, quite a big desk. At first thought it was just a black desk. And when I went up to it and looked at it, realised that it was like a flat screen. And when you touched the screen, it came to life. And it was actually an interactive resource where you could swipe layers away, and it was a human body. And you swiped through the skin as an organ, and then you swiped into the organ systems, the circulatory system, the respiratory system, the digestive system, and you were able to break it down into the smallest parts, capillaries in the circulatory system. And I was just struck by it as like, wow, that's amazing. And here I have it on my mobile phone. I've got the same technology on a mobile phone. Who would have thought in just a short amount of time that technology would have become so readily available? And so we can only begin to imagine what the world is going to be like for the students that are now sat in front of us in our classrooms, sat in front of our computer screens. What would that world be like? We can only imagine it. So there are often student books and workbooks, and they're always designed to be used together. But mostly, in my experience, workbooks can be used with any textbooks, and if you're very careful, you can make sure that they fit to your curriculum. Workbooks provide lots of opportunities, different activities that support the content of the curriculum that you're teaching or the resources that you're using. They can always be used as an additional resource, an extra activity, an alternative activity. For me, one of the beauties of using a workbook is that students can work by themselves independently. So they can choose to work on an activity, or they might choose to work with a partner to discuss things. There might be discussion opportunities within that workbook page or that workbook activity. Students might be guided to work in small groups or large groups or completely independently. Many of the workbook activities can be used at home, and that's really important at the moment because we find ourselves in a very unique situation where we're suddenly expected to be able to come up with amazing activities that we can carry out remote from school. And I know as a teacher trainer that I've never trained anyone, and I certainly haven't been trained myself, to design activities and experiences in science to be carried out remotely without a teacher, not in a classroom, not in a science classroom, at home in their kitchen, their bedroom. Who knows? So these resources are really useful for that, and I can honestly say that the workbooks that we wrote that I've been involved in for Mission Science, I did a review of them, and I can honestly say that most of the activities in the student books could be used remotely, and I would say nearly all of the workbook activities can be used remotely at home quite safely and easily. They don't need complicated equipment or complicated resources. I actually consciously thought about kitchen science luckily, I have been to the Caribbean a few times to work, and I'm very fortunately. Uh, Thank you, Shauna, for telling us that the workbooks are a great resource to use in the classroom as well. Yeah, that's really important. I think that they are useful, and I think that they are good, because we came and we worked with you guys, we worked with teachers when we were actually thinking about developing them and what we should include and what we should not include, and what you really wanted from these resources. And I think that's why they work, and the feedback for them is really good, as we can see in the chat box, as I can see in the chat box. So the workbooks are a very useful tool. Now, everything I've ever written, everything I've ever been involved in, is based around inquiry-based learning. I feel really passionate about inquiry-based learning. I am an inquiry-based learning specialist. It is my field, and everything I've ever written, over 100 publications now. I'm very lucky that I've only got a couple of things that I've ever worked on that haven't been published. So that's really good. So all of those publications are all based on inquiry learning strategies and techniques. And this is why. In inquiry-based learning, in an inquiry-based classroom, the learning is student-led. It's not led by the teacher. It's for the students, it's about the students, and it's led by the students. And I think that students really warm to that. They recognise straight away, something different here. This is not normal. We don't usually work like this. Normally the teacher stands at the front. I've not told this story for a long time, but I don't know, but I really enjoy telling you people. I really enjoy working with the Caribbean Project, so I do tell you lots of stories. And this is one. I remember I worked at a new school, and I was working in inquiry-based learning, and the head teacher came to the classroom and said, where's your teacher? Where's Miss Roberts? And one of the students went, I don't know. Really busy and engaged in what they were doing. I don't know. Like, leave me alone. Don't interrupt me. And he looked around, and I was sat on the floor at the back of the room. It wasn't a science laboratory. It was a classroom. We were doing. We were making some constructing buildings out of spaghetti, actually. And I was sat on the floor helping them, like, well, how can you strengthen this corner? I'm sure we can come up with something. And he walked over and said, what on earth are you doing? And I said, I'm teaching from an inquiry-based learning point of view. And he said, but you blend in with the students. I didn't see you. And I said, well, you shouldn't see me, because the focus is on the students, not me. I'm not important. I'm just a guide. I'm just guiding these through their learning. They're the ones in charge. If you can't see them, that's the time to worry. And so it's student-led. It's based around effective questioning. At the heart of a good inquiry-based lesson, there is always a good question. Now, that question can be designed by yourself, but I call it, and I say, it's powerful. If the students design a question and their learning is around that question, it's powerful. Why? Because that means they're interested. And if they're interested, then all the other skills just fall into place. They are curious. They want to ask more questions. They're basing it around a question. Why does that happen? I want to know. And when we're at that point, you have engaged those students. They are motivated to learn. They want to know more. And that is powerful. Research is also a big part of inquiry-based learning, and I think as we work through this, in workbooks there are often lots of opportunities, and there should be lots of opportunities for students to carry out research from a very early age. Yesterday someone asked me the question, well, they commented and said, but students in primary, excuse me, gosh, Please excuse me. Students in primary are not capable of carrying out research. The task is too difficult. Well, it is difficult if they've never done it before. They need to learn from a young age. Thank you for blessing me there, Frederick, again. Um, um, yeah, we need to train them. They don't just come into this and know how to do things. We have to train them. We have to work with them. We have to nurture them. We have to support them in new strategies and new techniques. I think students are really brilliant at research. Um, We'll look a bit more into that later, but they are very good, and we should use the fact that they're very good, they're very competent, and the reason they're competent, they're very good, is because they find it very interesting, and so we should use that to engage and enthuse students from early on. They're able to discover things for themselves, they're able to find out, problem solve for themselves, to be confident enough to find out, to find a solution. They become very responsible for their own learning. It's learning's not done to them, it's done with them. And they are responsible for the outcome, not us. If we ask them to do something and they don't, that's up to them. But it's not our fault. That's their responsibility. We encourage reviewing and reflecting. As practitioners, we know the strengths of review and reflection. As teachers, we're not terribly good at it. We're not very good at taking time out to review and reflect. And as we now look at what inquiry based learning is, some of you will be saying, I've been practicing inquiry based learning for years. But do you actually sit back and think, okay, what is inquiry based learning? What am I trying to actually put across to the students here? And often we don't have time to review and reflect. And so, if these webinars serve no other purpose but to give you 50 minutes of your life where you just think about an aspect of your practice, then it's worth it just for that, if nothing else. Inquiry based learning is about skills. It's skills based. It isn't about content. Content is part of it, but the driving force, the focus is skills, the development of skills. I've told this story a few times, I'll tell it again. When I first started in inquiry based learning, I was given a fantastic opportunity as a researcher to work with two classes. The classes came from the same demographics, they came from the same sort of area, same background, similar sort of reception, previous years learning, similar sort of school, similar ethos, everything was pretty much the same. In one class, I taught them from a very traditional, so they learnt the same things, the content was the same, the learning objectives were the same. But one class was taught traditionally. Teacher stood at the front, teacher directing learning, didactic learning. The other class was taught solely from an inquiry-based learning point of view. So they still had the same objectives, they still had the same content to learn. They noticed immediately, this is different. So some of the students that were a bit challenging and not always engaged were immediately intrigued. What's going on? What's different? Why are we doing it this way? And I had to give constant feedback to the investors. And for the first few weeks, they got very worried. Because for a couple of weeks, students not only didn't make any progress in the inquiry-based learning class, but they actually regressed. They dropped grades. We assessed them formatively and summatively, and those students regressed. I wasn't worried. The other class just plodded along, same as ever. We looked back at the patterns in the data, and they were making exactly the same progress. They were just plodding along, basically. After about 6 weeks, suddenly, the inquiry-based learning class started to make leaps in progress. I mean, not just like a little bit. They were starting to make the progress that we'd expect in a term or 2 terms. By the end of a term, which for me I think was between 12, 15 weeks, I think, by the end of the term, they all sat the same assessment. And then they sat another assessment, and they set several assessments so that we really, really could figure out progress that had been made. The traditional class made the progress that we'd expect them to make in a term, not really measurable. The inquiry-based class, wow, every single one of them made progress, every single one. Some of them made progress that we'd expect in over a year. Some of them made 2, 3 years progress because we invested the time in developing skills. They were problem solvers. They were confident workers. They were they could communicate. They could use confidently science vocabulary. They didn't worry too much if things didn't go according to plan. They had the confidence to know that we'll just try it a different way. So they were resilient, they were patient, all these skills. And so the content learning just seemed to, it was like a magnet. The content learning was just attracted to them. They just acquired it. And so after that initial period of investing that time, they just flew and they loved it. And we had some really good scientists. So it motivates, it enhances learning. Students are encouraged to discuss. When students discuss, they can synthesize knowledge. The higher order learning skills become second to none. And we've got intellectual, cognitive skills that are often left behind, particularly in primary education. So someone's just put that they agree that primary level students can do research. In fact, the earlier they learn, the better it is. I agree with you completely on that one. I also am quite involved in computing science, and it's very evident, very evident. You can see the students that started early on in primary school, they're very competent, I think is the word. They don't seem to ask as many questions. They just get on with it. If the internet dips, they're just like, yeah, internet's dipped, and they don't worry about it. It's not a challenge, it's not a big panic. So yeah, the earlier the better. The benefits: students are self-organized. If you say to a student, right, next Thursday I'd really like you to have completed this worksheet or this workbook, page number 17. Do you need anything? Let's have a look at it. Let's read through it. Can I help you with anything? Does it seem clear? Do you know what the expectation is? Yes. Okay, off you go. And they get on with it and they do it. And they don't come back and say, you told me. We very rarely hear that, because they know that if they come back and say to me, but you told me, and I'd say, but did you ask? Well, no. Did you understand? Well, no. Well, that's not my fault. That's your responsibility. They have a very independent approach to learning tasks. Using workbooks it encourages independent thought and independent learning. If you say to your students, page 19 to 26 are heavily linked to the learning of this unit, I'm going to use page 19, 21 and 27 as part of the lesson. But if you want to start looking at those or looking at the other workbook pages, then please do, because this will support your learning. And if you're really interested and you really want to expand your mind, please look at these, especially page number 23, because I'm not actually using that at all. I'm leaving that for you to use independently. And suddenly they get ownership. And while we're working through this workbook webinar, I'll use that word a lot. They have ownership. It belongs to them. It's not a school book that's owned by the school. It's their book, and they can use it in whichever way they feel. They learn to develop skills. They can handle the resources very effectively. They're encouraged to communicate effectively and to use proper scientific vocabulary. They learn to collaborate with others. Now, if we're using these resources remotely away from school, we can still design opportunities to collaborate with peers and with other members of staff, with their teacher. Lots of schools I've worked with have set up online platforms where they can email the teacher, email the peers, email parents of their classmates with information, with ideas about things that they're working on as a team. So that collaboration doesn't have to stop if students are working remotely. I like these review and reflects for students, and I have actually got a review and reflect journal for my own learning and my own life now, because I appreciate the value of it. So this is something that is in the mission science workbook, and it's at the beginning of every unit, every content unit. So the students are told what you'll be learning. We're learning about light and sound energy in this case. These are the things that we'll be looking at. These are some keywords maybe. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to write down what you already know. What do you know now? And it absolutely astounds me. And I think when you first start to do this with students, it astounds them as well, because you'll say, we're doing about light and sound energy, and they go, oh, I don't know anything about that. And then you'll say, well, just sit and just think about what you know about light, what you know about sound. And they might never have formally learned it at school before, but they've heard things, they've experienced it, and they actually know more than you think they know. This column is really useful for identifying any misconceptions. Let's nip them in the bud before they get embedded. When a misconception gets embedded, we have problems, because we've got to unlearn that. We've got to walk away from it, completely lose that idea and learn it again. And that can be really problematic. So it's important to establish and to find out these misconceptions early on. This document we encourage students to keep going back. What I thought I know, I might put a line through that, because I now know that light isn't a material. I now know that actually it's an energy, it's a form of energy. I'm going to put a line through that, and I'm now going to write in the middle column that I think I want to know a little bit more about that, but in the end column I'm going to put this is what it is, this is what I've learned. What does that do? Well, that allows students to monitor their own progress. You are almost looking over their shoulder. You're almost peeking at what they've done, because it's about them and it's for them. And I think that's really powerful. I actually love these. I remember developing them. I can remember thinking about all different ways to do it. Shall we do it as a circle? Shall we do it as a pyramid? How can we do it? And actually, for this age range, this one worked really well, because they can draw little drawings, anything that prompts them, prompts the thinking. As I said, all of these can be used for home learning or remote learning. Home learning used to be, didn't it, be pre-pandemic? Home learning used to be a luxury thing that we used to set for students now and again in science and other subject areas. And now for some of us, for my students in this country, home learning is the only learning at the moment. And so this is a magical resource, because, and don't say, well, I can't use them because we're not using the standards, we're using something else. Well, I use these with my students in the UK, and they're not using the standards either. But this is science. Science is science. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that we're not exactly ticking the boxes of the national standards, but you are, because all of these are in the national standards. And if you're using a different curriculum, it's science is science. So these can be really well used for home learning. And what I'm using these for at the moment is some of the practicals, the investigations, because a lot of teachers that I work with are telling me they're finding it difficult. They're finding it very, very difficult to actually continue students investigating and working hands-on with science, and they're finding it a challenge. Some of these worksheets or workbook pages are designed to be used at home. I can't think of any that can't be safely used at home. When I wrote this workbook, I remember thinking it has to be kitchen science, it has to be everyday science. The reason at the time I did that was because I want students to understand repeatability and the value of other scientists following their instructions exactly, repeating it exactly, and being able to compare with each other. If we use kitchen science, it's available. They can carry out that investigation while ever the ingredients last, while ever the bicarbonate of soda lasts. They can keep going, 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 going. And so it's really, really valuable. And so all of them can be used as activities, investigations to be carried out at home. Just make sure that you tell the students, you must inform the people at home that you are doing this and you must have support. They don't exactly need support to carry out these investigations because they're quite safe and quite easy to follow. But they do need that supervision to make sure they're safe and to make sure everyone around them's safe. And you know what? To make sure they're not using anything that they shouldn't be using. They're not using a potato that was intended for an evening meal or something. So they need to talk to the people at home. They need to be confident to do that. So the idea of the home learning in the workbooks are to encourage students to work in a different environment other than school. They have to be quite confident about what they're doing. They'll have to inform the people at home, I've been doing this at school and I'm going to do this at home, and I understand that I'm going to look for different objects, and these objects might have certain properties. They might be opaque. What does opaque mean? Opaque means you can't see through it. Do you see that this is an opportunity to talk about what they know? It's almost like, when you're teaching and you need to understand something to a very high level, even to teach it at a much lower level, because you have to understand it to be able to instruct and inform people about it. It's almost like that. They're in a different environment, they've got different experiences. If they're carrying out that survey at home, they're probably going to see different objects to at school. So they might be seeing a transparent mixing bowl, or they might see an opaque uh, cooking pan, things that they might not necessarily see in a classroom. And so it gives them a different opportunity. It gives them an expanded opportunity. It increases the opportunities and the things that they can come across that they wouldn't necessarily in a classroom. So it extends their understanding. They might be working with something a little bit different. So in school, they might have heated something up on a Bunsen burner, but at home, they might be heating it up on a windowsill. It's just extending their understanding. It also is opportunities to consolidate learning. Some of them, if you look at the surveying objects at home, it actually takes us step by step by step through something. So they've learnt it in class, or they might have learnt it online with you. And then they look at this workbook page or this worksheet in their own time, at their own pace, and they really have an opportunity to think about it and to consolidate what they've learned. Might be an opportunity to apply the knowledge that they've already learned to something new, to a different experience. Yesterday, I was talking about students were investigating temperature and how seedlings grew in different temperatures. And then we started talking about greenhouses. Our greenhouses used, it wasn't particularly on the curriculum that they were working with, but they suddenly realised that, oh, right, so if I've got a plant that's adapted to be grown in this temperature and the temperature drops, I can put it in a greenhouse. Yeah, it's extending and applying and synthesizing their understanding. So it's it's providing an opportunity for students to think about what they've learned and how it's used in the big world. It's used in the kitchen at home, so it must be used in that massive big world out there. Blended learning has become very topical because of this pandemic we find ourselves in at the moment. Blended learning opportunities. I have actually done a lot about blended learning. I don't know if some of you were at the webinar that we did some time back about blended learning and what blended learning is. And there are so many different types of blended learning. I think there are we're into hundreds now, basically. And ultimately, there are 3 or 4 different types of blended learning. And blended learning means that you have traditional face-to-face learning, and it's blended with remote learning, independent learning, and sometimes you might give children a task in the classroom, face-to-face, in a traditional manner, that then they take away and work on independently. A student could come to you and say, I'm really interested in this. Please, can I research this? Can I find out about it? Yes, what's your intention? Well, I was thinking I might research it, and I'm going to write a wiki page and I'll send it to you and you can give me feedback, and I might feedback and go away on research. That experience actually came from a primary school student who was particularly interested in something and they work really well with their teacher in a blended learning. So it really is blended learning. It's not this is all learning and then this is the remote or independent learning. It's a blend. We're working to the same outcome. We're working together. There are blended learning opportunities in all workbooks. Workbooks are designed to be used by students. And so there have to be opportunities for students to work independently, to work away from the classroom. And that is blended learning in a nutshell. This is a particularly good one. It's a project. Lots of project-based opportunities are blended learning. The project here is looking at, does the actual mass of a material change if it changes state? So if we heat a ice cube, does the mass of the ice cube change? If we continue to heat it and the liquid becomes a gas, does the mass of it change? And so we've got tables of results here. Now, you need to decide, is it important? What's the priority? Is it the content of the lesson or is it the table of results? If drawing a table of results is extremely important for your students, then you focus on drawing a table of results. Many times I observe lessons and we're into 40 minutes and the students are still trying, showing fantastic resilience to construct a table of results so that they can then get on with the investigation, find out, record and analyse the findings. You have to decide what's the priority. To be a good scientist, you need to understand how to read a table of results. You need to understand the importance of a table of results. You need to understand why we use a table of results. But if your students confidently can read a table of results and understand that the first column is the independent variable, the second column is the dependent variable, third, fourth dependent variable, if they understand that, then they don't really need to spend a great deal of time constructing them. They need to understand the way. But if they become scientists, and that's what we want them all to become fantastic scientists, technologists, engineers, and mathematicians. If they do, and they're working out there in the field or in a laboratory, will they draw a table of results? Will they plot a graph? And the answer is no. I've worked in laboratories in universities. I don't recall drawing a table of results or plotting a graph. It will be done for them. Computer technology will take that aspect over. And so we need them to understand the science. We need to understand why the mass might have changed when it changed to a gas. We need to understand that, not that they can fantastic table of results, but they don't actually understand change of state. I hope you're with me on that one. Okay, so blended learning opportunities, again, another opportunity through a project there. The workbooks also fantastically well for differentiation. Because sometimes, as independent, inquiry-based learners, we want our students to go away and we want them to be able to do an investigation, carry it out, record the results, and make sense of the results. But sometimes they might not be able to do that. And when you've got 30 children saying, what do I put in here? How do I measure the water? Do I put the lid on? And they're very good at science, but they just can't hold all the information in the mind at once. And so by using workbooks, students can often, if you look at this one, it's in bullet points. You cut this, you place that, you look at it, you measure, you record. And so they can almost look, number one, number two, number three. I know when I've worked with students who who use English as an additional language, I've often put pictures of equipment. You do this first, and it's on a loop, and then that. And I've watched students stand there. I've done that. I've done that. Okay, I'll go away and do that. And it gives them a fantastic sense of ownership and independence. So these workbook pages are really good for that, for differentiating, for supporting students through an investigation, step by step, to record what they see, hands-on at that time, recording what they see. Also, there are challenges. This one's synthesizing knowledge. I'm sure it's not in any curriculum that they'll understand that doctors use models rather than chopping up human beings. But if they're doing about organ systems, they might find it incredibly interesting that doctors actually use models of humans or an organ system to actually learn and develop their skills. And this is about that. So it's synthesizing their knowledge of an organ system into something that's completely new and a little bit, it's interesting that doctors use models of things, use a plastic heart to cut up rather than the real thing. So this is also one that's using living systems, and it's something, again, that's not necessarily, but it takes the students to that deeper intellectual level. Now, if we can carry our students to a deeper intellectual level, they're using skills at a different level. When they're using that understanding at that level, it's not just about processing information. When they start to synthesize and when they start to apply information, it's stored in the long-term memory. And so when it comes to assessments, or when it comes to using knowledge later on to build on it, to use that foundation, the more able to retrieve that knowledge. I always say to students, if you don't use it, you will lose it. If you're just copying information from the board or from a textbook, you are not using that information very well. And so you won't use it very well. You won't recall it very well. You won't remember it very well. Being a good scientist is really important that students understand the principles, the methods behind being a scientist. Ask the students, how many scientists do you know? How many scientists have you spoken to today? And often they say, none. Or they might say, you. And you say, well, you're a scientist. You're practicing science now. So therefore, you are a scientist. We are all scientists. I'm always told that students don't understand a fair test, but they do. They understand very well what's fair and what's not fair. Give someone a chocolate bar or a new pencil, and the other person will know that that's not fair. The independent variable, make sure they understand that that is the thing they are changing. I for independent, I for I am. I am changing that. It's my choice. I'm investigating that. I'm changing it. The dependent variable, what they're measuring. Control variables. Again, someone told me last week in primary science that there isn't really a place for control variables. Well, looking at the one where we looked at the temperature of plants and how well they grew, one looked at the did light have any impact on the way that seedlings grew, seeds? And the idea was, well, I think that light won't have an effect on seeds growing because seeds are under the ground. good prediction. So they placed one in a cupboard and one on a windowsill, and guess what? The one on the windowsill grew first. It germinated first. Why? Because they didn't control the temperature. So the temperature on the windowsill was perfect, and the temperature in the cupboard was very cool. So it developed much slower. So yeah, there are opportunities for control variables. We just have to point them out. So this workbook sheet here is really supportive because again, it takes them step by step, little steps to a fantastic outcome. How will you record your results? Do you need to draw a table of results? This is a great opportunity, again, using real data. Often we don't get to the point where we're plotting data and we're comparing it. We need our students to be confident in recognising and being able to see trends and patterns in data. Right. So as that increased, as the temperature increases, so does the levels of carbon dioxide. That's interesting. So there's a definite link between the two variables there. The beauty of it being in a workbook is that the students can look at this over and over and over again at their leisure. They're not looking at a screen where it's going to be gone in a minute. They can keep referring back to it and looking at it and really absorbing it and analysing it. They can begin to plot that graph. And then when they've run out of resilience and steam and concentration, they can put it to one side and they can go back to it again and again. And it might take 3 or 4 days to plot that graph. But what a fantastic achievement. What an amazing achievement for this age group to be able to plot that data and look at it in a graph. Why is it a curve? Why have they joined the dots? Why haven't they joined the dots? Why is there a line of best fit? The workbook gives students the opportunity to work at their pace. And in science and in primary schools, that's a real luxury, to be able to look back, take it away, absorb it, analyse it. Making sense of data, there's lots of opportunities in workbooks to actually look at data and really analyse it. Why have they recorded it in that way? Do I really need to draw a table of results for it? Well, if you haven't got one, yeah, you do, because if you looked at anybody's results, someone's gave me a set of results at a university on a paper bag. And I said, what does this mean? Well, I think I drew a circle around that because I think that's the result that I think might be right. Yeah, but you don't know. What are you telling me? What are these results telling me? And they told me nothing. And it was painful for this person to go, but I hate drawing tables of results. Well, there's a purpose. Understanding the table is the most important thing. Will they draw a table? Will they plot a graph? What will they do in the real world? As I said, a computer will do it for them, but they need to understand it. Why is it right on? Okay, I have met parents. I have met them in Kingston, in Jamaica, in a bookshop. I have spoken to parents in the bookshop, and they asked me resources that need to be written on there. It becomes expensive because if they don't write on them, they can share them with brothers, sisters, siblings, cousins. And yeah, I'm a parent. I get it. That's true. Let me tell you why they write on. They record the information in real time. As they learn, they record the information. They might learn a bit, record a bit, learn a bit, record a bit. They record as they learn. As it makes sense to them, they record it, and they record what makes sense to them. They can look back at it. I don't remember learning about carbon dioxide. I'm sure I wasn't there that day. Look back in my workbook. Oh, well, I coloured it in pink. Oh, I remember I didn't have a pen that day, and so I used someone's pen and it was pink. I remember that now. Oh, yeah, I remember filling in these sources of carbon dioxide. I remember thinking about where it comes from and the natural sources, how plants actually produce carbon dioxide as well as use it. Yeah, I do remember now. And it helps them. And they've got this little chain of events reads the book that they learned that day and becomes a valuable revision tool because they look back, it's written in their language, they might have drawn pictures, diagrams, it's written there for them. So they haven't got to read a lot of text, it's there in very simple terms that are meaningful to them. And so it becomes a valuable, valuable revision tool. Sometimes when I'm devising these webinars and working on these, I might go back to my notes. How many times have you been teaching something that you've not taught for a number of years or for a long time and look back in your notes? How many times have you done that? Well, students are encouraged to do that here by having the opportunity to write on that page. It also gives students ownership. This book is mine. It's got my name in it and it's got my notes in it. It belongs to me. I will look after it. I will fill it in my way. I will write it properly. I'll look back. Some students might look back and think, I never used page number 84. No, I will use it now. Let me challenge myself. Let me see if I can actually do this. Have I actually learned that? So it's got so valuable, so many values to use in the workbook, and they are a fantastic resource. Use them in your lessons. If you're teaching something and you think that the students might struggle, look through the workbook, look through the resources. Is there something that would support them? There might be a diagram or a step-by-step instruction. Plan that right in your plan. Don't forget page number 27 off and use it, utilize them. Remind the students, some students keep their workbooks at home. So remind the students, don't forget to bring your workbooks in next week because we will be using them. And use it. Really use the workbooks, plan to use them. Doesn't matter what kind of planning you do. You might just put number 11 and circle it. Yeah, I'll use number 11. It's a really good resource. That is a fantastic resource for recording research. They could have researched that independently, but what a great way, what a fantastic visual way to record it rather than just writing or a picture. So it becomes a tool for students to record their learning. This is another where students can complete a task. They've got some prompts, they've got information. So even if they're not very confident, it becomes very useful. Build that confidence. Yes, I do understand this. I can do this. I can learn this myself. They can learn a very valuable lesson from this as well. I'm not really sure which is the correct answer, but I know that's wrong. I know G is wrong, I know H is wrong, I know C is, that leaves me. So is it that one? It could be A, it could be D. Okay, let me put a little cross next. It could be these two. I'll go on. D is actually the answer to that, which means A is the answer to that. Some teachers tell me that's cheating. No, it's not. That is exam technique. That is absolutely exam technique. And if that gets an extra mark, it's well worth learning. So again, these pages are so valuable to revisit and not to relearn. I've heard many times teachers tell me we've got through the whole thing and we've got a month spare to revise. I've taught the whole curriculum already. I hear it so many times. And I always say, you've taught it already. Yes, I've done it already. And I say, you taught the whole curriculum. Have they learnt it? Ah, right. So it's not giving you time to revise. It's giving you time to relearn. And really, you haven't got time to relearn because you're doing it in a very difficult way because you're relearning that bit, then you're relearning that bit, then you're relearning that bit and that bit. Where If you've taught it and they have learned it, and it's embedded through using things like the workbook to make sure that consolidated learning and embedded their learning, then revision becomes an independent learning task, and students work on it for themselves at their pace, at their own time. And then we can revisit again where we started. We can revisit, we can review and reflect on our learning. So I thought I knew that. I wanted to know that. I've learned that because that's in the last column. You use that then to inform your future planning. So they still want to know that. So 30% of the class still want to know what air is. I can put that into the beginning of my next lesson. I'll plan that in. There's a worksheet about that. I'll use that worksheet just to make sure that they've understood and that they do actually know that. They just didn't understand the objective or whatever it might be. I've come to the end of that. Hello to everyone. Thank you for your lovely positive comments. I really am impressed with that. Hello, Jamaica. I should have been in Belize last year working, but hey ho, one day, hopefully. So it's nice to see where you're all from and what you're all up to. Has anyone got any questions? If you've got any questions, please type away in that little chat box, and I will have a really good go at answering your questions. Normally, these webinars, we would be together and we would be in a room somewhere and we'd be carrying out CPD, and it would be very interactive, as my sessions always are. If any of you have ever been to my CPD sessions, you do not sit down for very long. But we're not together, but it's still interactive in that this chat box is really important to me because I write these webinars for you, and I am extremely fortunate that I have worked with you and I feel that I know you. And when I'm writing, I write for you. I really, really do. And so to sit here behind this screen, I've really no idea if I'm doing a good job. I don't really know if I'm answering your questions. The only reason I know is looking at these comments in the chat box. So I've got some, thank you for that. Thanks for letting me know that this is okay. This is wrong. I like the features inquiry-based learning, and these features can be applied to all subject areas. What a fantastic point. That is so true, Carleen. That is a true point. We're not developing, are we? We're not developing science skills. We're developing life skills. My son recently bought an apartment and he thanked me for the life skills I'd taught him to weigh up data, because one was telling him, you should buy it because of this, you should buy it because of that. And he had the confidence. So late on in his life, a grown up. I know that methods can be aligned to other subject areas. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. I should have included that. They are really valuable points. Thank you so much. That's Shauna again. Thanks so much for sharing that. I guess now it's the end of our webinar. So you can contact us. Any questions, I'd really be happy to hear from you. Any questions, any comments at all. If up to now you're all telling me it's good, which is great. But if you want me to change anything in future webinars, please do let me know. That's the only way I can make progress. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed spending some time with you today. And thank you so much for giving up your valuable time. I know how valuable it is. So thank you. Always a pleasure attending your webinars, Debbie. Brilliant. I will carry on delivering them whatever you want them. So thank you so much. I guess it's over to the boss lady, over to Raina.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Debbie, as always. And you can tell from the attendees, they've really thoroughly enjoyed the session. Debbie always has fantastic sessions, so we always get good feedback, and it's always good. Just like teachers, we all need some positive affirmations and feedback. So it's not just for the students, it's also for the teachers and our presenters. So just to say, Debbie's doing a fantastic job, and also to the attendees, as always, your enthusiasm and your attendance is always appreciated. In terms of
Frederick, thank you for your comments there, boss lady.
In terms of your certificate, this will be provided automatically as soon as the webinar finishes, and the PowerPoint and the webinar recording, hopefully within 2 weeks. Some people have mentioned in our session earlier that they may not have received a few of the presentations from earlier webinars. Please just bear with us because we do have a few webinars at the moment. So just please be patient with us. We will get those out to you as soon as we can. So just to say again, thank you so much to Debbie, and thank you to the attendees, and we look forward to having you join a session soon. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you.